In a universe where science fiction blends seamlessly with metaphysical realms, where fantastical beings and profound philosophies collide, lies a world crafted by the visionary mind of Alejandro Jodorowsky. The Jodoverse, or Jodorowsky's universe, is a fictional universe created by this Chilean filmmaker, writer, and artist, along with some of the world's most singular and talented comic artists, an incredible sci-fi universe full of love, revenge, intrigue, betrayal, and redemption. The Jodoverse is characterized by its vast, sprawling mythos, intricate storytelling, and a blend of science fiction, fantasy, and metaphysical themes. Throughout the Jodoverse, Jodorowsky weaves a rich tapestry of interconnected stories, characters, or ideas. Many of his works share common themes, symbols, and motifs, creating a universe that spans various comic book series. Here I present a compilation of videos of the channel related to the universe created by Alejandro Jodorowsky and the artist who accompanied him in each comic. I hope that some of these videos awaken your curiosity for this particular universe, and if you already knew these comics, maybe it will encourage you to take a second reading. The Incal is a series of graphic novels written by Alejandro Jodorowsky and originally illustrated by Mobius. It is an epic space opera that combines a fantastic intergalactic journey, science, technology, political intrigue, conspiracies, messianism, mysticism, poetry, debauchery, love stories, and satire. The story of the Incal begins with the Chilean filmmaker and writer Alejandro Jodorowsky, known for his prolific work in avant-garde cinema. In the early 70s, he had risen to prominence with films like El Topo and The Holy Mountain. This one had been especially successful in several European countries. This gave him the opportunity to aspire for a bigger production, much bigger production. In 1975, Jodorowsky was working on the pre-production of the adaptation of Frank Herbert's book, Dune. For this, he wanted to make an illustrated script where not only will be the dialogues and the description of the action, but drawn images of each shot and camera movement. For this, he needed a comic artist. When he saw the Blueberry comic drawn by an artist called Giraud, the sequences of the comic fascinated him, and he knew that this was the person he was looking for. At that time, contacting people was much more complicated. That's how Jodorowsky went to the office of his agent to help him in his search, and as if they were fated to meet, Alejandro Jodorowsky found Jean Giraud in that office by chance. They began to work tirelessly in a castle rented by the producer of the film. Jodorowsky's adaptation of Dune was far away from Frank Herbert's concept. It was his own vision, a very personal, eccentric, original and unique vision, even for our times. All this is reflected in Mobius drawings. It is well known that the film was not made for several reasons, among them the economic factor. It was a film ahead of its time, and it was difficult for big producers to risk so much money in a science fiction film with characteristics never seen before. Also, the big Hollywood studios did not trust in the vision and personality of Alejandro. But the ideas of that script would not remain forgotten in a drawer. The Chilean filmmaker transferred those ideas to a story for a comic book, which would also feature Mobius. The first pages of the Incal were initially published as An Adventure of John the Fool in the French magazine Metal Harland. Being a story by Alejandro Jodorowsky, and usual in most of his works, it is an odyssey, a path of discovery and redemption that an early character made to access a higher stage of consciousness. All this is magnified by a futuristic design, the graphic narrative, and the absolutely spectacular art offered by the brilliant Mobius. The Incal is not only based on Jodorowsky's ideas for Dune, but also on Mobius' previous works such as Arsak and The Long Tomorrow, which further enriches an already extraordinary story. The plot is about John the Fool, a small-time detective who, upon receiving a strange object, must confront, without being proposed, the high powers of the cosmos. With the help of the strange bird he has as a companion, he will be able to move in the field of metaphysics. Their inquiries will lead them through a world of heroic adventure and symbols, personal fulfillment through enlightenment. In his initiatory journey, he will go through different stages. First, he will have to find his inner courage and find his allies with whom he will witness a revolution against the nobility, visit the center of the planet, and seduce an alien queen to avoid an intergalactic war. John the Fool, a Class R licensed private investigator and occasional bodyguard, the Fool is reluctant to assume the role of hero and suffers from mood swings, self-doubt, and temper tantrums. He has fondness for cigars. He is a common character, both usually condemnatory and praising of the human condition, kind, self-sacrificing, and selfish, prone to running away. Depot, the Fool's loyal and good-natured concrete seagull, generally smarter and more resourceful than John himself. Anima and Tanara, two sisters charged with protecting the light and dark Incals, respectively, of which Tanara hired the Metabaron to kill John the Fool and obtain the light Incal. The Metabaron, the greatest bounty hunter, mercenary and combat ace in the known universe, sent to kill John the Fool. Saloon, the adopted son of the Metabaron and the biological son of Anima and John the Fool. Like Anima, Saloon has immense psychic powers. The work consists of 312 pages in 6 volumes. The Black Incal, the Luminous Incal, What Lies Beneath, What Is Above, The Fifth Essence, The Dreaming Galaxy, The Fifth Essence, Planet the Fool. In addition to completing the story, 2 more sagas were made before the Incal with the comic artist Zoran Janjetov. This saga tells the childhood of John the Fool. And final Incal with José Ladrón as the artist. This last saga rewrites the story began in After the Incal and tells the events after the original saga, connecting with elements and characters from before the Incal. In the 80s, the Canadian animation director Pascal Blais created a short trailer for the Incal, but the movie was never made. US black metal band Vihargam released the album Ove Tenebrae as a musical adaptation of the Incal on October 16, 2020. In 2021, Jodorowsky officially announced a big screen adaptation by Taika Waititi. The Incal presents us with one of the best duos in the world of comics. After the failure of Dune, Jodorowsky and Mobius knew how to reinvent the concept and create a work that combines almost perfectly all the thematic and artistic currents of the convulsive and fertile decade of the 80s. Throughout the saga, society, civilizations, and planets are described perfectly structured and with amazing details, with a story loaded with a particular sense of humor, used as a counterpoint to the philosophical and mystical transcendence of the series. A universal European work that has influenced several generations of readers and artists, and will surely continue to do so for a long time to come. The Metabarons is a comic book series about the story of a dynasty of perfect warriors, written by Alejandro Jodorowsky and illustrated by Juan Jimenez. This series shows a world where fantasy and science fiction blend to build an epic tale of patricide, destiny, incest, and blood in the purest tradition of Greek tragedies. The Metabarons has its seat in the saga The Incal by Alejandro Jodorowsky and Mobius, a masterpiece of contemporary European comics. There, a simple secondary character who crosses the path of John DeFool, protagonist of the series, becomes a relevant and attractive character with enough charisma to earn his own space. He was the last of the Metabarons, the nameless one, the one who decides not to have offspring to ensure his survival. This character appears without too much explanation in the Incal, and Jodorowsky wanted to clarify the mystery of his origin. For that, he needed a comic artist. Jodorowsky works his script according to the artist and not the other way around. He had known Juan Jimenez's work for a long time and admired the realism he projected in his universes, and he thought he was the perfect artist to develop a new epic story full of fury, passion, and clashes of metal and flesh. The publishing house Les Humanoids Associés prepared a meeting between the two at the end of the 80s, but it did not work out. Jimenez refused to collaborate with Jodorowsky. The Argentine artist had heard unflattering things about the Chilean. He was presented as an unbearable guru with two eccentric habits. Besides, Juan Jimenez wrote his own scripts, and committing to a project that would keep him away from his personal universe did not motivate him. It was years later when the publishing house with another directive put them in contact, and they had a lunch where Jodorowsky showed Jimenez that beyond a somewhat eccentric personality, he was not what the bad tongues said. So after that conversation, Alejandro Jodorowsky got his artist to the ability to represent images that bordered on hyperrealism to develop a Homeric story in an immense universe. Juan Jimenez was inspired by paintings of Rembrandt, the Renaissance, and the Napoleonic era for the illustrations of the Metabarons. He also takes ideas from more modern artists such as Norman Rockwell and Italian illustrators of the early 20th century. The collaboration with Jodorowsky changed the way he drew landscapes and characters compared to his previous works. The script's seamless blend of futuristic technology with medieval customs surprised Jimenez and made him strive to depict this contrasting hybrid element in as much detail as possible. He created sophisticated, technologically advanced machines and costumes inspired by medieval ages and samurai culture. The story arises from the narration that Tonto, a small robot servant of the Metabaron caste, tells Lothar, another service robot with a huge and giddy appearance, who always asks him for a story to entertain him. These two characters, in perpetual dispute, persist throughout the 8 volumes of the story. The Metabarons tells the legend of Autumn, Agnar, Steelhead, Agora, and the nameless Metabaron. Each warrior is mutilated by his father in his youth to test their resistance to pain and receive a powerful mechanical body part as a replacement for the destroyed limb. In each generation, the son and heir must face his father in a battle to death. This battle have taken many forms, from hand-to-hand combat to space duels, and succession is only achieved when the son succeeds in killing his father. They have a strict code of honor called Bushitaka, named after Japanese Bushido, It demands that practitioners dedicate themselves to victory in all things, at any cost, where the only alternative to victory is death, and they even abandon their own family members in the pursuit of total victory. Each Metabaron has a number of advanced weapons. These include cybernetically implant lasers, body implant nanotech warheads, swords that can disintegrate in bursts of flame, and advanced spacecraft. Many of the Metabarons also display powerful psychic abilities. This lineage of invincible warriors lives on a planet that holds a great secret, Epiphi, a substance capable of stripping gravity from any object, no matter how large, and an accident triggers the event. The saga is full of adventures, battles, murders, betrayals, great love stories, incest, patricide, and everything that Jodorowsky's wild imagination is used to. Autumn, the castrated one. He is the paladin of the galaxy, but he cannot have children until he meets Honorata, a powerful witch who managed to get pregnant with a single drop of his blood. Agnar, the son of Autumn and Honorata. He is able to levitate in the air, so his father mutilated his feet and replaced them with metal boots that allow him to stay on the ground. Steelhead, Agnar's son, is the most extreme case. His father rips off his head and he grows up with a cybernetic brain that prevents him from having feelings until he finds the head of the last poet of the galaxy and puts it on, which allows him to conquer the heart of Doña Gabriela. When they are expecting twins, the birth is complicated, and Steelhead must implant the boy's brain in the girl's body so that at least one of them survives. Agora, son of Steelhead and Doña Gabriela, trapped in the body of a woman, decides to mutilate his breast with laser surgery. His father recognizes her as his heir. Autumn, the great-great-grandfather. Honorata, the great-great-grandmother. Agnar, the great-grandfather. Oda, the great-grandmother. Steelhead, the grandfather. Doña Vicenta Gabriela de Rocha, the grandmother. Agora, the father-mother. Nameless, the last Metabaron. This one is essential science fiction comics for lovers of this genre, with a story out of the head of one of the great writers of the medium, the great Alejandro Jodorowsky, accompanied with the most extraordinary graphic art. The story of the Metabarons would not be the cult work it is without the contribution of the talent of Juan Jimenez. Proof of this is that Jodorowsky tried to resurrect the Metabarons in 2008 and 2014 with Dayal, the first ancestor, and the rival twins, but despite the undeniable talent of the artist, the results were not the same. For many people, the true Metabaron will be today and always drawn by the hand of that Argentinian creator of universes. The Techno-Priests is an 8-issue limited science fiction comic book series created by writer Alejandro Jodorowsky, artist Zoran Janjetov, and colorist Fred Beltran. The story is set in the same universe as the Incal and the Metabarons. The Techno-Priests is full of incredible ideas, spectacular art, action, mysticism, in short, everything a fan of Jodorowsky's universe is looking for. Once again, Alejandro Jodorowsky takes us to his particular universe of science fiction and mysticism of the Incal and the Metabarons, this time by the hand of the artist Zoran Janjetov. Zoran Janjetov is a comic artist born in what is now Serbia. He is among most prominent comic creators of former Yugoslavia, published worldwide. From a very young age, received the support of his parents to develop his drawing skills. He studied at the Academy of Arts in Novi Sad, Serbia. In 1981, he started work on the Bernard Panasonic, published in magazines US Trip Magazine and Breme Zababe. And it is in 1986 that the paths of Jodorowsky and Janjetov crossed. The Chilean writer chose the Serbian to finish the color art in the Incal. Later, he would be in charge of illustrating before the Incal, after Mobius refused to do it. Another important element in the development of the Techno-Priests was Fred Beltran, who was in charge of the color. Before joining the Techno-Priests, he had already had a long career in several European publishers. By 1995, he discovered the Macintosh and began to experiment with computer-generated comics. 2 years later, he met Alejandro Jodorowsky. One of the results of their meeting will be the Megalex series, about a futuristic city populated entirely by androids, made entirely with computer techniques. With the Techno-Priests, Alejandro Jodorowsky would demonstrate his almost infallible ability to choose talented people to develop his stories in the best way possible. Jodorowsky would deal in this work with topics that today seem to be very relevant, such as the rise of immersive video games and the brainwashing of the masses. This story begins with the old albino Techno-Priest narrating his life in the company of his trusty talking paleo rat, Tinny Griffey. His story begins when a spaceship of pirates attacked the sacred asteroid where Panefa, a young and virginal woman destined to become an oracle of the imperial palace, lives. The pirates rape Panefa, resulting in the birth of 3 children. White-skinned albino, his strong gray-skinned brother Almagro, and the red-skinned 4-armed sister Onyx. Panefa rejects Albino and his sister as her mother, seeing them as mutants unworthy of her love, while she accepts Almagro as her son. She retires and, with the help of a herd of a kind of alien cows, creates the great Camembert cheese factory, makers of the galaxy's finest cheese. Disregarded by his mother for his weak physical nature, Albino spends time playing video games and dreams to one day become a video game maker. He is forced to clean the dirt in the stables along with his sister, while his mother and brother Almagro mistreat him every chance they get. One day he tells his mother that he wants to become the best game creator in the galaxy. His mother reluctantly put him to study under the tutelage of Don Massimo, director of the Techno-Priest school, where video game creators learn their craft. Albino is shocked by the rigid and oppressive system, but thanks to his tenacity, he immediately succeeds in virtual reality training and proves that mental power is superior to physical strength. Thanks to Albino's unique powers and passion for what he does, his mentors and peers quickly realize that he is not only unique, but a genius. In addition to exploring Albino's story, the Techno-Priests also explores Panefa's quest for revenge against the pirates who raped her. Her plan is to castrate them all, and she acquires a ship to accomplish her mission. However, in the process, she realizes that such actions may have a very high price to pay. The entire comic features complex and interesting characters and explores recurring concepts in Jodorowsky's stories, such as the journey of spiritual enlightenment and the exposure of cultural taboos in our society. Albino, the future supreme Techno-Priest and the narrator of the series. Teeny Griffey, Albino's lifelong companion and co-narrator. Panefa, former priestess and mother of Almagro, Albino, and Onyx. Almagro, Albino's older half-brother as well as one of his triplet siblings and the most favored child of Panefa. Onyx, Albino's younger half-sister as well as one of his triplet siblings and the least favored child of Panefa. The Techno-Priest has three main plots. The first follows Albino leading an exodus of 500,000 young Techno-Priests to the Promised Galaxy. The second plot follows his childhood and rise to become the Supreme Techno-Priest. And the third follows his family during that same time period. All these stories are divided into 8 issues. Techno-Priest School, No Hope Penitentiary School, Planeta Games, Alcatraz, The Sect of the Techno-Bishops, The Secrets of the Techno-Vatican, The Perfect Game, The Promised Galaxy. The Techno-Priest follows in the wake of the Incal and the Metabarons, with its own style in terms of the plot, developed by Alejandro Jodorowsky, charged with a spiritual nature and a truly remarkable art with the detailed drawings of Zoran Janjetov and the bold color treatment of Fred Beltran. This combination of such talent resulted in a comic book series of the most visually beautiful science fiction, with a truly compelling story that, like Jodorowsky's other comic book series, remains in the mind of anyone who is lucky enough to read it. Megalex is a graphic novel written by Alejandro Jodorowsky and drawn by Fred Beltran. This is a story of science fiction and futuristic fantasy with the classic extravagant touches of the Chilean writer. On this occasion, Alejandro Jodorowsky would join his talent with Fred Beltran to set in motion another epic science fiction adventure. Fred Beltran, born in France in 1963, after failing his baccalaureate and a brief period at the Met Workshop in Penningen and at the Superior School of Graphic Arts in Paris, did his first graphic works in the field of illustration, animation, and architecture, and in 1985 he created his first comic book, The Blue Pyramid, a story with Mobius influences that remained unpublished. In 1990, his first album, The Belly of the Minotaur, appeared, published by Les Humanoid Associés, and he also participated in several collective albums for the same publisher. In 1995, he was part of the group of European authors contracted by the important Japanese publisher Kodansha, for whose magazine Comic Morning he created the character of Nina. At the same time, he began experimenting with computers to create his illustrations, which would mark a style that would fit perfectly with Megalex. And this comic book series would become a reality when he met Alejandro Jodorowsky in 1997. Jodorowsky explores the theme of nature versus machine. In a story, as is usual in many of his works, the characters embark on a journey that transforms them. Megalex is a planet on which there is a war between the biotechnologists and the ancient civilization of the planet, which used to be called Giradios, the technological powerhouse ruled with an iron fist by the royal family composed of the undead king Jod, Queen Maria, and the beautiful princess Kabata. Only two parts of the world escape their authority: Enchanted Forest and the Deadly Sea. In Megalex there are several laws: compulsory drug addiction, prohibition of any kind of work, prohibition under penalty of death of any biological conception, since only procreation via test tube is authorized. Megalex is filled with clones and drug workers. After 400 days of service, these clones are eliminated and new ones are born, but the clones, before their death, realize their impending fate. They rebel against the system. In the midst of the revolt, a new clone emerges called Anomaly and later receives the name Ram. This clone has genetic defects. He is basically larger than the rest of the clones and generates a desire to escape from Megalex. On board a ship, an AI being named Chalice discovers him and flees the ship alive. He is assisted by Adama, a beautiful woman from the labyrinth in the bowels of Megalex, created before the age of anti-gravity. They hitch a ride on a kind of enormous intelligent crocodile. They go deep into the labyrinth and meet some tribal chiefs. Meanwhile, military ships drop packets of a kind of food that the inhabitants are able to transform into any kind of dish they want. But the rebels in the labyrinth plan an attack on one of the military complexes, which in turn enrages King Od and Queen Maria. Adama and Ram are drawn into it, with Princess Kabata playing a key role in the story, as well as a hunchback named Syrian, who sprouts wings and declares war on Megalex. The series was released in 3 volumes: The Anomaly in 1999, The Humpbacked Angel in 2002, and The Heart of Kabata in 2008. The 3rd volume has a more traditional graphic style, although it lost that characteristic computer-generated images and a certain continuity with the first 2 volumes. Even so, the great work of drawing and beautiful color treatment can be appreciated. Megalex is a truly special piece in the list of Alejandro Jodorowsky's creations, maybe not as action-packed as the Metabarons or the Transcendence of the Incal, but like its predecessors, it is a story that captures the reader's interest with memorable characters that lead you to immerse yourself in that city, exquisitely illustrated by Fred Beltran. Many might think that a comic with computer-generated images would detract from the personality of the story with generic images, but this case is quite the opposite. Perfectly accompanies the futuristic setting and gives it a unique touch with a masterful handling of color by the French artist. This is a graphic novel for anyone who enjoys the outstanding and eccentric stories of Jodorowsky with extraordinary art provided by Beltran.